How to talk AI. According to Pitchbook, the market for Gen AI is expected to reach almost $100 billion in 3 years. Only 5% of you feel that the risk outweigh the benefit, but only 4% of you are in production. So despite all the excitement, the email, the volume of info you have about this technology, Gen AI really still is in its infancy. And so today I've invited a dear friend of mine, an expert in the field, a human whose judgment I trust, to come and talk to us about how to talk AI. But before we do that, let's celebrate this week's data, AI, and analytics heroes. The first one is the CEO of Wendy, Todd Penegor. I don't know if you know this, but 75% and 80% of Wendy's customers are choosing the drive-through as their option to get food. And of course, that creates billions of possibilities for misunderstanding. So they're testing this application called Fresh AI, a Gen AI application that really should change the relationship between the restaurant and their customers, and also create a delightful customer experience. Let's take a look at that video where he explains how he's going about that. The second hero, I really like his story, is Scott Wong. He's the VP of Platform Engineering at Credit Karma. His team nearly runs 60 billion model predictions daily. They deploy more than 300 models weekly, and they power financial recommendations to almost 130 million members. Scott's team now can do 7 times more experiment than they could 5 years ago. We got the story of this journey, really someone that you should follow. There are many more people like this who are innovative with AI and Gen AI applications. I think about my friend Lewis at Accenture, built this application called Alice for legal intelligent contract exploration. They analyzed 1 million documents, helps almost 3,000 professionals. Take a look at these stories. And then finally, Ocado. Ocado is a retail technology company. They can predict what you will want to order 4 days before you do. You can find out more about these stories in my blog down here. And in particular, I want to point you to some resources I put on my LinkedIn feed about the author of Harvard Business School, Kareem Lakhani. He's the author of Competing in the Age of AI, this great book here that I think is very topical. I published a summary of a podcast around how Gen AI changes everything. You're going to want to check out this because I think it'll help you. Now, speaking of Gen AI, it's time for me to introduce my guest, Donald Farmer, who many of you already know. Donald, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. You're in the car, you've got cool sunglasses. I know you have 3 great rules on how to use Gen AI, but before we get there, tell me a little bit about the context. How did you become such an avid tester of Gen AI solutions out there?
Oh, this goes back a very long way. One of the very first conversational applications that was ever built was called Eliza, which was a kind of fake psychiatrist application. I think it was built in the 1970s. And when I was learning to code, that was one of the very first examples I worked in, was trying to have those conversations. And I was really interested in the first wave of AI using applications like Prolog and Lisp and so on. So I've always been interested in language processing. I've always been interested in conversational experiences. And more recently, I was a board advisor to Narrative Science, which is a company which was acquired by Tableau and then consequently, obviously, by Salesforce. And they specialized in generating text from data to give a narrative experience. And in fact, their technology is behind some of the latest developments in GPT technologies in business intelligence. So this is something that's really been in my career for a very long time. And it's actually fantastic for me to see so many people getting excited about it. And it's fun to be part of this.
So we'll talk about the use cases, how you use it today. I sent you that HBR podcast as well, where Professor Lakhani talks about the risk of falling asleep at the wheel when you have really, really good AI. So does this happen to you? What do you think about that?
Well, not literally. I mean, it could literally happen to us if we're driving along with a self-driving car. You know that experience. You get so relaxed about it. You trust it so much. And so it's almost a question of over-trusting. But I think there's another problem with AI potentially, which is not only that people over-trust it, they're not aware enough of the potential issues, but also we forget to use our human experience. I don't know if you've had this experience, but I certainly have, that I used to be really good at navigating and map reading, and I could remember my way around cities. And now I use GPS so much that, I use GPS to go to places that I know how to get to. And I think we'll have the same experience with AI. We'll use it to do things that we are perfectly capable of doing ourselves if we just applied ourselves a bit more.
So when I think about the best-in-class Gen AI applications, I think they at least need to respect 5 attributes. I call them MTCAT. Let me break it down for you. M is for multimodal, of course, text, audio, voice, but also code and math. T is trustable. This is a dimension we often forget about. Fidelity, robustness, reliability, accountability, transparency, fairness. Those are important, trusted dimensions. C is for current. You cannot make decisions on data that's old, that's not fresh. A is applied to a workflow. Chatting installation is helpful, but it's not enough. You need to think about how you create a task from it. Maybe create an email, create a doc, extend into your research. And then C is contextual. It needs to understand, persist the domain, understand the conversation throughout this. In fact, humans sometimes are not even great at that. So that's how I think about it. MTCAC. What do you think?
And I like it. I think there's some we should drill into. I think the currency one is particularly interesting, because let's be careful about 2 things. There is, if you use a model today, and ChatGPT, for example, is trained over data until 2021. I think Bard is a little bit more recent, or tries to be a bit more recent. But there's two things here. One is that what is the data that the model is trained on? In other words, what is the data which has generated all the rules? But also, what information does it have access to, which is different from what information was used to train the model. So today, you can use kind of the ability to do web integration. So you're using a model which was trained on data up to 2021, but it can access information now which is more recent. But so it's applying older rules to newer data. That potentially has its own consequences as well. But the size of these models, they're so huge that it's going to be quite some time, I think, before we have models which are able to be continuously trained and continuously updated.
That's right. We're just at the beginning of this. And so I think it's important for people to think about creating a framework for themselves so they know what they're getting into. One of my customers, Anil, the CVP of cloud platforms at Walmart, actually wrote a piece about that, where he said, before getting into the tech, create your framework for how you're going to adopt it, and make sure you understand what the technology can do and what it cannot do. All right, so you and I spent some time together a few weeks ago, and you took me through a session on how you use Gen AI to create content with you. It was interesting because it almost was this notion of companionship, a human-like relationship with the Gen AI, where you were really having a conversation and getting to your results, helping it and helping it help you. So what are your 3 rules? How should people talk AI? How should people use Gen AI to help themselves?
Well, the 3 are pretty straightforward. They're to be conversational, to get feedback, and don't expect any accuracy from it. To dig into that a little bit, the conversational piece is important because there are ways of doing what they call prompt engineering, and there are all sorts of prompts ranging from 0-shot, 1-shot, few-shot, many-shot prompts, but that's engineering. For most people, what you need to do is have a conversation, and having a conversation makes it more natural. Frankly, it makes it more enjoyable, but it also enables you to build up the experience with the application and the application's knowledge of what you're trying to achieve. And we're very good at doing that as humans with language, and so we should use that natural skill. The feedback is, you can generally in most of these applications give a thumbs up or thumbs down, but I normally give feedback in the course of the conversation. That's great, that's interesting, I'm not so sure about that, because that is another way of building up the conversational experience, which from my point of view is not only more human and enjoyable, but actually gives the AI a richer understanding of what's working and what's not working, so it can give you better contextual results. But it is very important not to expect accuracy. It can give you answers which are just simply wrong. And so you need to double check any of the facts that it gives back to you, because these are systems which are not really designed to give factual information. They are language models, and they're predicting what is the best linguistic response to something, which isn't the same as giving a factual response. No doubt all of that is getting better, and perhaps in a few months, that part of this will be somewhat redundant. But I think you still need to check facts. I would say use it as if you were talking to a friend who is very intelligent but not necessarily well informed.
A friend who intelligent but not always well informed. That's a really good one to think about it. So be conversational, give it feedback, don't expect accuracy. Those are great rules, I think, for people to think about how to use these tools. Donald, we could talk here for hours. Where people follow you? Can they find more about you?
Right. Well, you can follow me on my blog, which is called creativedifferences.substack.com. And I've actually just written a blog today using a conversational method to talk about a subject I know nothing about. And I've put that up on that blog so people can see how the conversational method works. And we can link to that and people can try it and see the results from, a couple of different AIs.
Awesome. And you're putting the conversation as well so people understand how you got there. So there's
Exactly.
no accuracy principle will be respected. Well, Donald, this was awesome. I could talk to you for hours, just like I said. I hope all of you enjoyed this conversation as much as the two of us did. Donald, have a great weekend, and I will see the rest of you next week.